Right, on one hand, we see the rise of these different secular religions. We're here to talk about true faith, but
I know what he means by secular religion. I don't know what the term true faith means. Have you ever noticed that everybody's convinced that they have a true faith? He's at the Pray, Stand, Vote Summit, whatever it's called, which is a Christian organization, and he's not a Christian. He's a Hindu, and there is no way both of these religions could be true because they are contradictory toward each other. So to say it's like he's saying, we're here to talk about true faith. Us Christians and Hindus have true faith, unlike those other people who have a false faith. I wonder if the Muslims have a true faith.
I'm going to go somewhere else first. We see the rise of these secular religions, what I'll call cults, in the United States.
I like the way Joe Rogan puts it when he says, do you know what the difference is between a cult and religion? A cult is started by a guy who knows this bullshit. He's lying to everyone and fooling everyone. And in a religion, that person is dead. The only difference between a cult and a religion is the religions are just older.
The first of them is a cult of racial wokeism. I wrote a book about this a few years ago. A new cult that says your identity is based on your skin color. That if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged. That if you're white, you're inherently privileged. No matter your economic background or your upbringing, your race determines who you are and what you can achieve in life. Now, this is a little bit odd because that runs counter to what Martin Luther King told us in the Civil Rights Movement. That we wanted to be judged not on the color of our skin, but on the content of our character.
I think here he is committing the straw man fallacy, where he's not accurately representing the position of his opponents. I don't think anyone is saying that being born black is an inherent disadvantage. I think what they're trying to say is that if you're born black, the odds are you probably are descendants from slaves. And that means you had economic disadvantages in your upbringing, and you had a different upbringing altogether. I don't think Martin Luther King would disagree with that. Don't get me wrong, though. I do think a lot of the people in the woke are being ridiculous. A lot of people in the woke go around making false accusations of people being racist, not because they're actually racist, but because they disagree with them. Hell, I'm probably a racist now because I disagree with them.
You can't believe both of those two things at once, and so that's a little bit of a contradiction, but you can believe them if you're subscribing to a religious cult.
It amazes me that he can see the fault in other people's belief systems or cults, but he can't see the fault in his own.
So right around the same time we see the rise of this cult of racial wokeism, we see the rise of a different belief system. This one's the cult of gender ideology in the United States. This one has so many letters, LGBTQIA, they just put a little plus at the end just to include the rest of the alphabet. This one has some interesting, and we're not going to be angry about it, because sometimes our anger clouds our judgment.
Well, I think the fact that you have been indoctrinated since birth to be a Hindu has clouded your judgment.
If we want to get to the bottom of what's going on, we have to see it with clarity. This one says the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born because it had to be in order for gay rights to be civil rights. But now also says that your own biological sex is totally fluid over the course of your life. Again, you can't believe these two things at once. And
I actually think he's making a very good point here. I am all for the LGBT community having equal rights, but I think some of them do get a little bit ridiculous, and he is pointing out how they contradict each other.
And you go even one step further, there is no gay gene.
People on the right often say there is no gay gene. They'll even cite me when I said there is no single gay gene. And that is correct, just as it's true that there is no height gene, and there is no eye color gene, and there is no hair color gene. All of those traits are controlled by a large number of genes that interact with one another, that do interact with the environment. But that doesn't mean that those traits aren't largely genetic. So there are probably many different genes that affect sexual orientation. We don't know what they are yet. We don't know exactly how they work, but there is very convincing evidence that they do exist.
But there are two sex chromosomes. 2X, you're a woman. X and a Y, you're a man. Right? So you can't believe these two things at the same time if you're applying principles of reason or logic.
And I think I've said before, you can't believe in any religions if you're applying the principles of reason and logic. You have to use faith.
But you can if you're subscribing to a secular cult. So you got racial wokeism, you've got gender ideology. Then at the same time, you see now the rise of this third cult in the United States, the cult of the climate.
We all know there are plenty of scientists that say that climate change is a very serious concern, like the IPCC, the Union of Concerned Scientists, on and on. And I do know there are some scientists who are very well qualified who say climate change is not a very big concern, or it's not caused by man, or we shouldn't worry about it as much. Yeah, they have contradictory views, but you cannot say that climate change is a cult when they got scientists backing them up.
That says we have to abandon carbon emissions at all cost in the United States, even as we're perfectly fine shifting those same carbon emissions to places like China when they tell us it was supposedly about global warming. And then you see the same people who are opposed to carbon emissions in the United States are also the ones who are most opposed to nuclear energy, the greatest form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind.
As a person who's very concerned about climate change myself, I agree that we should start using nuclear energy as a replacement. But I understand why people don't want to use nuclear energy. It's because of all the accidents that have happened, they are scared of it. It can be very, very dangerous. They've improved the safety since, Chernobyl, but I understand it. I'm also a vegan, and part of the reason why is because I am an environmentalist. I'm concerned about climate change, and animal agriculture is a huge factor in it. So I would like to see more people who are concerned about climate change eat less animal products. It would help. If you think I don't know what I'm talking about, I would recommend you watch the movie Cowspiracy. You can see it on YouTube.
These are contradictions. So I could go on all night. We could go one secular cult after another. But that's not my point. My point in raising this is to ask a deeper question. What the heck is going on in our country that we see the rise of these very different secular cults at the same time? Here's the answer. We're in the middle of a national identity crisis right now.
Saying we're in the middle of a national identity crisis is a bunch of gobbledygook that doesn't have any real meaning to it.
Faith, patriotism, hard work, family. These things have disappeared.
So he's at a religious conference with a bunch of Christians and him being a Hindu saying faith has disappeared, yet he can't see how stupid that is. I wish faith would disappear because I think people need to start deciding their beliefs based on evidence, reasoning, and logic instead of faith. Adolf Hitler once said, "Tell a big enough lie and repeat it frequently and it'll be believed." I think this is the reason why people are convinced that faith is such a great noble virtue, because this is a lie they're told from the time they're born to the time they die. From the time they die, faith is not a good noble virtue. It's a bunch of crap. And I don't know where he got the idea that patriotism, family, and hard work have disappeared. That don't even make sense to me. I guess his idea of these virtues is on the decline in his mind. I'm an atheist, but I'm also a very patriotic man. I love my country. I'm a truck driver. I work very hard, and I have a family. I don't know what he's talking about.
And that leaves a moral vacuum in its wake. And when you have a black hole that runs that deep, that is when the poison fills the void. I say this to you as a relatively young person doing what I'm doing now. I'm 38 years old. I'm a millennial. I was born in 1985.
His age is completely irrelevant.
I'll tell you, speaking as a member of my generation, what's going on. We are hungry for a cause. We are starved for purpose.
I have a family member that I love very much, and he loves me. And he is a very devout Christian. And he goes around, I've seen him say several times that atheists like me don't have a real purpose. He says our purpose is pretend. And him as a Christian, he has a real purpose. So it seems like to me that people are believing the nonsense of religions because they're the ones starved for a purpose.
And meaning and identity at a point in our national history when the things that used to fill that void, belief in God, belief in country, belief in self.
What the hell is he talking about, belief in self? Who in the hell does not believe in themselves? This is just a bunch of gobbledygook that sounds good to people who don't think.
These things have disappeared. And when you have a black hole in your heart, that is when the poison fills the void.
So is atheism the poison that's filling the void in my life? I bet he thinks it is.
Here's the actual secret. It almost doesn't matter what the poison is, actually. I've made this mistake over the last several years. I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., wrote a second book about victimhood culture. It's like playing a game of whack-a-mole. You get the wokeism down here, you got some transgenderism over there, got that down, COVIDism over here, got that down, climatism's up again, globalism. It's an endless cycle. But do you think it's a coincidence? Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, globalism, depression, anxiety, fentanyl, suicide.
There are plenty of religious people who suffer from depression, anxiety, take fentanyl, and commit suicide. He is completely divorced from reality.
These are symptoms of a deeper void.
When he talks with such dramatic pauses like, these are symptoms of a deeper void, he sounds like a cult leader to me.
As the old saying goes, if you have a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead.
That sounds like to me something a cult leader would say.
The same can be said of pledging allegiance to the flag of this nation. Don't pledge allegiance to the American flag. You're going to pledge allegiance to a different flag instead.
I'm a very patriotic man, but I don't think we should force kids to pledge allegiance to the flag. For one, it violates people's freedom of religion. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses don't want their kids pledging allegiance to the flag. I do want kids to be patriotic, but for the right reasons. Not because they were forced to, recite some pledge that they don't understand, but because they grow up learning that they have rights in this country that they don't have in a lot of other countries. I also want them to know that the military has made sacrifices to protect their rights. This video was a lot longer than I expected it to be. I hope anyone stayed to see this part. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you found me to be interesting enough to stay this long. I really wish Vivek Ramaswamy could see this video and respond to it and show me what I'm getting wrong.